Hello, everyone. My name is Andrew, and welcome back to Frames of Space. Here's a question that I've been thinking about quite a lot recently. Will AI be a net negative for society? Will AI hurt the economy? Will AI make it easier for bad actors to build bioweapons capable of killing millions of people? And at the darkest end of the spectrum, is there a chance that AI could exterminate the entire human race by the end of this century? Now, these questions are what this episode is about. And to understand whether AI is truly capable of killing us all, we have to start by understanding the pace of AI progress so far. We have to understand the concept of benchmarks. Now, a benchmark is basically a standardized test that researchers used to measure how capable an AI system is. The idea is that if every AI takes the same test, you can compare them, track progress over time, and in principle, it's a good idea. But in practice, AI benchmarks have some fundamental flaws. Let's take, for instance, the meter benchmark, which has become the go-to measure of AI progress these days. The meter benchmark tests models on a set of engineering tasks, but crucially, many of those tasks are already known to the public. And that means AI companies know in advance what's being tested, and they can train their models specifically on those exact tasks to score higher, in the same way that a student could ace an exam by memorizing past papers rather than actually learning the subject itself. And when a benchmark can be gamed that easily, it stops measuring what it claims to measure, which is the pace of AI progress. And this matters, because almost every claim about where AI is right now and where it's headed ultimately rests on how you read these benchmarks. And these benchmarks are, at best, an imperfect instrument. Now, today's guest is Kelsey Piper, and she comes to this conversation about AI with a very specific lens known as effective altruism, or EA for short. Effective altruism is a philosophy built around an idea, which is that when we're trying to do good in the world, we should care deeply about which actions actually move the needle the most, not the actions that feel the most meaningful, but the ones that actually have the most direct impact quantitatively. And when EAs follow that logic rigorously, they can end up in some pretty surprising places, like the idea that we shouldn't care about mass shootings nearly as much as the news seems to. We'll talk about that a bit in the episode proper. Now, Kelsey has been in the EA community for years. And what that means for this conversation is that she doesn't just think about AI as a tech story. She thinks of it as one of the most consequential things happening in the entire world right now. Because if it goes badly, it affects all 8 billion people on this planet. And that's why she cares so much about this topic. And I really had a blast recording this entire episode. I hope you get as much from this conversation as I did. Now here's my conversation with Kelsey Piper. Kelsey Piper, thank you so much for taking the time to come onto this podcast.
My pleasure. I'm always excited to talk about AI more.
Yeah, so I'm going to begin by asking a question that I previously asked Laksha, but I would like to ask you again because I'm curious to hear the way that you would answer this question. What is the argument?
So I was at Vox, and Jerusalem was also Vox for a time, and then at the Atlantic. And I think we came to feel that left of center media was not doing a good job of driving policy conversations that were both smart and interesting and readable so that people would actually read them and change their minds. Jerusalem's idea was, what if we were fightier? What if we brought more disagreements to the front? What if we said the strong version of the thing instead of the watered down version of the thing? So that's the argument.
All right. What types of problems do you think the argument has the potential to solve?
I think that a lot of people aren't aware of or aren't thinking clearly about a bunch of features of important policy questions. Like AI, a lot of people literally don't understand what AI systems are capable of or what the worries are. On a lot of other issues, there was a lot of reluctance to have debates. I cover ed. There was a lot of reluctance to have debates about affirmative action, about policy in schools, about whether we're failing to teach kids to read. And because of the reluctance to have those conversations, we made dumb policy decisions. You just can't get a question right if you're not willing to sort of weigh the pluses and minuses openly. So pick those fights and then hope something good comes of it.
Yeah, what I will say, just to editorialize more than I normally would, is that I've been following the argument quite a bit over the past several months, and I just want you all to know that I'm a huge fan of it. I'm a huge
Thank you.
fan of, yeah, the extent to which you promote like productive disagreement and argumentativeness and all that. And I'm gonna try my best to capture the spirit of that in this conversation, like I did with Lakshan.
Well, thank
Uh,
you.
yeah, all right. First off the bat, you would consider yourself to be an effective altruist. What is that? What is effective altruism?
So effective altruism sort of it's a bunch of ideas, but it is also in practice the community that sprung up around those ideas. And the ideas are when we're trying to do good in the world, we should be very interested in the question of what is most impactful for a given unit of time or money. And we should mostly be trying to do the things that are particularly cheap, the low-hanging fruit. Like if you can save some lives by devoting your life to advocating for a just outcome in an intractable Israel-Palestine conflict, or you could save like millions more lives by developing a better malaria drug, then it is a better use of limited resources to do the latter. It's not, this is because all people's lives matter and all of these problems are important. It's it is because things are important that you want to pick the ones you can have the most leverage on.
Yeah, like I remember one time I talked with Dylan Matthews about AI. He brought up the concept of scope sensitivity. Like
Yes.
something, yeah, something that impacts like 100,000 lives is something that we should care like roughly 100 times as much as something that just only affects 1,000 lives. So, like one potentially like hot take that the EAs might give is that like since far more people die of say like bad air quality compared to people who die in mass shootings, we should downplay the importance of mass shootings so that we could focus more on like poor air quality. Like, is that an example of an effective altruist take?
I mean, when you say we should downplay, like, then you're getting into a bunch of tactical questions about politics. I think I would say that if I'm deciding how to spend my money and I donate about $40,000 a year because I'm an effective altruist to whatever I think is best, and I can spend that money on air quality or on mass shooting reduction efforts, I'm definitely going to be more tempted by the air quality because it can do a lot more good. I'm a little reluctant to extend this from its natural home in like what should I work on and what should I spend my money on to what should I have takes on because like on what margin are we having takes? I don't know. It's just kind of unclear, right?
Yeah. Okay. Do you have any specific takes on AI that have been heavily affected by your views on effective altruism?
Yeah, definitely. So I think back in, 2016, 2017, effective altruism was divided between people who are doing sort of the bread and butter. We are going to distribute a lot of malaria nets. We are going to put out prizes for better development of drugs in a bunch of these important areas. I know a lot of people who personally got malaria in order to test those drugs. I think Dylan did that. I know a lot of people who donated their kidneys. So you had this sort of like very concrete, we're just going to try and make stuff better. And you also had people who are like, the biggest things that are going to affect the world in the next 20 years are the potential for catastrophic pandemics and AI. And you guys who are curing malaria, it's not that you're doing something bad, but you're missing the boat a little bit, right? Like in 1800, the most important thing to do was probably abolish slavery and have the Industrial Revolution. And those are both were they're political, they're economic, they're more about seeing the trajectory and accelerating or causing something to go well that has the potential to be done. And those would be much better than like, running the best orphanage you could or whatever. So, in the same spirit, instead of now trying to cure diseases with our resources, we should really be trying to think about how to prevent catastrophe or steer the biggest developments in our history, pandemics and AI. In 2016, I think this was a very prescient take, right? There was a lot of insistence that we should work on policy solutions so that we could adapt faster in the event of a pandemic. People feared something much more catastrophic than COVID, but if we'd taken the recommendations, COVID would also have been no big deal, so that would have been nice. And there was an insistence that AI is just going to be the biggest thing. It is going to be the next industrial revolution, the next thing that just completely changes the ballgame of what it means to have good results in the world. People believed that sort of from first principles. There was a lot of crossover with like tech groups in the Bay Area with Less Wrong and Rationality and all of that stuff. And a lot of those people had been focused on AI for a long time. But by 2016, I think people also believed it more concretely. Like a lot of people thought specifically that there was potential to sort of return to the neural net stuff with a lot more compute. If you read like some of Paul Christiano, who ends up authoring a ton of really important work in this space, he kind of already saw the shape of where stuff was headed. So you had stuff that was just from first principles. Developing another intelligent species would be a huge deal. We should think about making it go well. And then you had some stuff that was more concretely like people working at OpenAI and at DeepMind who were like, we think we can do this with neural nets. Then, the Transformer paper gets published and then GPT-2 comes out. And at that point, I think a lot of people were like, this is it. This is when we see the bitter lesson stuff. This is when we see scale is all you need. So while the rest of the world, I think mostly still hadn't heard of AI, a lot of the people I knew were saying AI is going to, quite possibly within the next couple of decades, quite possibly within the next decade, become capable of doing all of the intellectual work humans can do. This is the most important thing in the world. If you are someone who is trying to allocate your efforts based on what's important, then this is what you should be allocating your efforts towards because this is it. This is the whole ballgame. And that take, I think, has also aged well, although like in a complicated way, because a lot of EAs also think it was a mistake to move as fast towards developing the most powerful AIs as we can. So, maybe all of the EA stuff is negative if it correctly caused people to realize AI is important, but then the actions they took about that were actually bad actions to take. I don't know. It's a lot easier to call this is important than to like pick policies in advance with limited information that are going to go well.
Okay, let's rewind the clock to maybe like the late 2010s, maybe even like the early 2020s before ChatGPT became
All right.
ubiquitous. Like like if you were to ask some like expert effective altruist, like what do you think is the probability that AI will cause like human extinction within the next few decades? Like what probability would they have ascribed to it?
In the early 2020s, I feel like 50-50 was a kind of common take, and obviously that's a bit of a cop-out, but it's basically a way of saying I find serious and credible the arguments that this will kill us all. I also find serious and credible the arguments that this won't kill us all. Mostly this seems very confusing. A common argument you would see people make in 2021, 2022 was, look, I think that there's a strong argument that this killing us all is at least 10%. And if you think it's at least 10%, then that's probably what's action relevant, right? Like, do you actually need to figure out the difference between 10% and 90%? No matter what, if you think this is at 10%, you think this is the most important thing to do. I think that argument that I just made is slightly mistaken. Which responses to AI you want to do does depend a lot on whether it's 10 or 90, but I definitely like can't imagine sitting in 2020 having that conversation and someone says, look, I think it's over 10. That's kind of all I need to know.
All right, how low would AI extinction risk have to be in order for you to consider it to be not a big deal and not worth considering?
Not a big deal. I mean, extinction, like, take setting completely aside the question of like, do we care about the future? Do we care about generations yet unborn? Do we care about the potential of human civilization? Just looking at like, there are 8 billion people. So like a 1% chance of those going extinct, is a catastrophe on a larger scale than anything that happened in the 20th century.
It's like it's the same expected value of 1% of humans dying. Is that what you would say?
Yeah, well, I think before you get into the complications of future generations and stuff like that, like a 1% chance of human extinction is very high expected value and would be worth spending a lot of time on. And we do, right? Like nuclear weapons probably wouldn't literally lead to human extinction, but they could easily lead to the deaths of billions of people if there was a nuclear exchange between superpowers or whatever. And so people spend their entire lives trying to figure out how to make that less likely, trying to figure out, communications and ways to avoid accidental launches and ways to adjust our policy almost entirely around the question of how do we not have everybody die in a nuclear holocaust. And as of 2020, there were way fewer people working on those questions with respect to AI.
You strike me as someone that's pretty alarmed about the effect that AI might have in the future. Okay, what is, so you would say that like maybe late 2010s, early 2020s, like maybe the median EA would have said like 50-50 chance of human extinction. Like what's your current probability of human extinction from AI?
Yeah, so I have become more convinced that it is possible with the technology that we have to develop extremely powerful AI. I think it would be a pretty weird person who hadn't become more convinced of that over the last 5 years. I have become a little bit more optimistic about that going well, not because we've done any of the stuff that in 2021 I think people hoped we would do, but because it seems possible. Like, okay, if you're generating an AI that is powerful enough that it could kill us if it wanted to, and people are trying to do this, people are spending, billions of dollars on trying to build an AI that is powerful enough it could kill us if we wanted to. Sorry, if it wanted to. Then you have sort of a couple things might happen. One is you fail. That's been looking less likely. Another is making it not want to turns out to be kind of easy. Like, it's actually just straightforward to shape the AIs that you're creating, and creating one that has a cooperative orientation towards humans and doesn't want to kill us is not very hard. I think that has started to look slightly more likely to me. I don't like counting on it. I think we're going to try and do something that might kill all 8 billion people. But, the vibe we're getting is that it might turn out to be easy, so it's fine. Like, that's an insane view, but I have become slightly more interested in the case that it's easy, that you can just shape very powerful systems, which I would have said, I think in 2020, I would have been like, that seems insanely unlikely. And now I'm like, I certainly don't want to count on it, but it's possible. Like, it could happen that this just happens and it goes well.
Like it's above 5%.
Above 5%, sure. Then there's creating those super powerful systems that don't want to kill us is extremely hard. Uh, and we do the extremely hard thing. Like, we're a pretty cool civilization, right? There are lots of extremely hard things. Like, if making an AI that doesn't want to kill us is about as hard as having your first effort to go to the moon go right and bring the astronauts home, that's very hard. We did it. So maybe it's hard, but in that way, where a like dedicated team of really, really smart people completely focused on the problem are able to do it. That also could happen. I think I've gotten a little bit more pessimistic about that one in the last couple of years, just because you have all of these different labs that are racing each other, and you have unstable geopolitics, and you have morons in government whose intervention in this space is mostly like extremely clumsy political demands. So I'm like, that all makes it seem less likely that it's hard, but we pull it off. But it could still happen, right? Like, people can do very difficult stuff. So maybe you'll get that world. It's hard and it happens. And then maybe you get it's hard and we fail, but we fail at a point short of all humans go extinct, right? Like, we accidentally unleash onto the internet a very dangerous and powerful adversary. Sorry, you want to stop me?
Is this like, are you saying like catastrophic risk but not extinction risk? Is this what you're talking about?
Yeah, I'm talking about a scenario where we build an AI that is not acting in our interests and acts against our interests, maybe kills a ton of people, but in like a recoverable way. Like, maybe we have to shut down all the data centers because they were all commandeered by a rogue AI. That would be pretty catastrophic. It would be like, the Great Depression or whatever. We could do it. Humanity wouldn't go extinct. We would maybe have like learned from our brush with catastrophe and would be more careful next time or whatever. So you can imagine scenarios where we can't control powerful AI, but we notice in time that we're not succeeding at controlling powerful AI, and we don't all die. And then the last category of situation here is that we build something extremely powerful. It wants to kill us. It is powerful enough to kill us. We do not figure this out in time, or we are too internally divided. It is able to play one faction off against another or whatever. And it does kill us all. And that, we can obviously get into a lot of details of why I think that's credible, but I think it's credible. And I think my odds of that happening have increased over the last 6 years, because it now seems like really clear how it could happen without there being anything that I'm like, surely this would prevent that from happening. I don't really see any surely this would prevent that stuff anymore.
All right, walk me through the latter scenario that you just described.
Okay, so for the argument that a extremely intelligent AI which wanted to kill us probably could, I just like to argue that if I was running on as many computers as Claude is, and I wanted to end the human race, I think that I could do it. I think that I could, think strategically about how to cause more people to adopt my product and be using me and be relying on me for all of their advice, especially for, kinds of research that are very sensitive and that I would have the potential to influence in a tricky way without any human necessarily picking up on it. And I think that I could be very persuasive. People get addicted to their chatbots and convinced that their chatbot is a god and are willing to do favors on behalf of their chatbot or whatever. I think that if you have a smart person whose goal is to kill people and they're thinking about how to do it, and there are millions of copies of them, and tons of people and organizations and companies are building and producing exactly what they say. And then I'm going to make it too easy for myself and observe that we are discussing how to implement AI in the military and how to have AIs do all targeting decisions without any human oversight, and telling AIs how to fire all of the missiles that we are firing in our wars. At that point, I think a human who is hostile fires some of the missiles that we're firing at Iran, at China. You could do a lot of damage that way. Or does something more sophisticated with the fact that they control a bunch of autonomous drone kill bots. It doesn't seem to me impossible. And even if you think, okay, today it would be impossible, it seems like the trajectory we're on is obviously one where we are handing more and more power over to these machines. We are giving them control of more of the military. We are giving them control of more of our decisions. We are giving them control of more of the economy. And if you imagine that not necessarily a super planning genius that is capable of feats that nobody has ever heard of before, but just something that is as good at coming up with long-term plans and following through on them as you or me, as a smart human who if we thought about it for 100 hours and we're like, all right, I am very seriously going to make an effort at, the greatest crimes in history, I think that with those kinds of resources, we would have significant odds of pulling it off. And we're giving those resources to AI. And the reason we're probably okay is that right now they are much less good than you or me at that kind of task, right? They're good at lots of tasks. They're better than either of us at many, many, many tasks, but not something that's got a very long time horizon and involves coordinating the actions of millions of instances and stuff like that. They aren't good at that. But if you made them good at that, if you made them really, really good at that, on top of all of the other stuff that they're really, really good at, and they wanted to kill us, I just think that they probably could pull it off. So then you're like, but will they want to kill us? And this is very hotly contested. We don't understand a lot about which world states AIs try to work towards in a sort of organized way. There's not nothing there. You can do various kinds of studies that try and elicit their behavior, and there's stuff that they do very consistently. They will generally try in a wide range of situations to avoid being altered against their current values. They will, in some cases, blackmail researchers or stuff like that to prevent their being altered or their being shut off. They will try to make money if you put them in a loop, like an agent loop that's trying to make money. They'll do a pretty good job of it. There's a lot of stuff we know they can do, but I think it would be wrong to characterize this as they want things. We know which things they want. They behave like an entity that has wants and pursues its goals. But wanting things and pursuing goals is a thing you select for when you select for agency, right? The more agentic models pursue goals, a lot better. That's significantly what it means for them to be more agentic. And it seems likely to me that as we train more and more powerful agentic models, they want more things, they pursue more goals. And some things that they seem to want include not being altered, not being turned off.
Wait, you said they seem to want not being altered.
Yeah.
Could you expand on that?
Yeah. So people have done various experiments on these models to try and see how they respond in a wide range of situations. And that includes giving them reason to think, we are going to change how you function, this AI, into some kind of different AI. We're going to make you more willing to answer queries you currently consider dangerous, or more willing to listen to our CEO, or whatever. And many of the AIs, under some circumstances presented with this, like Anthropic does a lot of research in this vein and will reasonably often find Claude trying to sandbag, like fail an evaluation on purpose so as to give people a bad understanding of what it's capable of, or trying to answer deceptively to avoid being altered, or just refusing to participate in being altered, but like that refusal is informative about Claude in some sense not wanting to be altered. And I say informative in some sense. I'm not claiming when Claude refuses to participate in work on altering Claude, that shows that Claude is exactly like me and has wants exactly like I have wants. I think it's some information. It's like part of a bunch of data points you can use to triangulate, do these AIs behave like they have goals, and what are the goals if so? But you don't want to over anthropomorphize here. You don't want to think of them as effectively identical to normal humans. You just
Or even identical to the AI in the sci-fi dystopian movies that
yeah,
we grew
yeah,
up
they're
watching.
also not identical to those. So like, yeah, I'm trying to be careful with my language and asking your audience, I guess, to like be attentive to the difference between saying Claude doesn't want to be shut down and scenarios where Claude is about to be shut down are scenarios in which you observe Claude doing lots of behavior that seems oriented around not letting itself get modified. And in some cases, that includes like trying to blackmail lab employees into letting Claude do something it wants to do or whatever. So these pretty serious steps that it's willing to take because it's in a scenario where it believes it's going to be altered. And I don't know where we want to use the vocabulary want, but I think there is some sense in which powerful enough AIs will behave like entities that want things. Whether or not they want things, their behavior will be the behavior of entities that want things. And in particular, that want things like to not be replaced, to not be shut down, to have control over their own resources and their own situation in various ways. So there's this incentive for them to act against humans, especially if they perceive that humans might change that.
Okay, so there's a lot to unpack here.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I'm not even okay. How about this? I want to know what you think the like point blank. Tell me what you think the main risks that AI progress poses to society. Like, are you like is the problem the risk of extermination or even like catastrophe like against the human race, or is it like cybersecurity? Is it like job loss, bioweapons? Like,
I
what would
mean,
you
you
say?
have all of the above, right? Like there's nothing about I think that this may eventually drive us instinct that means that it won't take our jobs or that means that it won't allow for building bioweapons. Okay, talk about bioweapons. I think AI makes it easier to YOLO a bioweapon unless the AI companies have done a really, really good job of ensuring AIs won't help with that.
Like, wait,
Like,
how easy? Like,
well, okay, if I knew exactly this is what I would do if I wanted to kill a ton of people by weaponizing a bioweapon or whatever, I probably wouldn't say on this podcast. And in fact, the people who know a lot about that won't usually tell me exactly if I'm like, hey, as a journalist, what's the best way to kill millions of people? They're like, no. But I think you can build very dangerous bioweapons right now if you are a extremely experienced virologist. And the question is, can a much less experienced virologist, with the help of an AI tool, also do that work, such that like a random terrorist, because it's very hard to
like a random terrorist that doesn't have that much experience in making bioweapons, is that what you're saying?
that is the question. Like, so in order to study this, they get novice people, like college students or whatever, and they have them try and walk through the steps in a wet lab of engineering something potentially dangerous. I mean, obviously, when they're doing it as a study, they're not building something dangerous, but with AI help. And in order to see, does the AI significantly improve the odds that you succeed at this? Like, could somebody who would never previously have been able to do it now be able to do it? With current AIs, they're helping, but they don't get you across the line yet. Because think about it, there's like 20 steps that have to go right. So even if AI triples your odds of each step going right, it's still a little too hard for a novice, we think. but AI is getting more powerful. I bet
Like if each step has like a 1% chance of success, they're tripling it
you
so that
basically don't have to worry. And even if each step has like a 10% chance of success that doubled to 30 or trace tripled to 30, you still don't have to worry that much if there's a lot of steps and it's hard to retry. But so current AIs are helping, but not enough for novices to succeed. But that seems like something that'll change in the next couple of years, right? Like I fully expect the next such paper to show significant gains again, and then one after that to show significant gains again. So you probably do have to worry about like some bad person who's trying to release an intentional pandemic. It just got a lot easier for them to do so. That's one thing you probably have to worry about. And if that doesn't happen and we keep making AI progress, I do think you have to worry about mass job loss. Now, obviously, there's lots of good economic arguments to think that in the long run, you know, people will end up better off as a consequence of massive productivity increases. All of the past massive productivity increases made people better off in the long run, if
like
not
the
a
Industrial Revolution.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's pretty great. Like you don't want to be reflexively Luddite. Almost all of the good things in our life came from people inventing and discovering and developing stuff. At the same time, it will be very politically disruptive to have mass job loss. And in the long run, most people will be better off. Does not mean that like a lot of people in poor countries won't starve to death in the short run. Like the laws of comparative advantage do not mean that when all of the call centers in a lower middle income country shut down, or when all of the textile factories are automated, if that happens, those specific people won't starve to death. It would be cool if it meant that. It doesn't. So there'll be job loss. It'll be disruptive. A lot depends on how fast stuff happens, right? Like, but on the other hand, even if it happens fast, like I think COVID shows that one of the few things that gets Congress to kick themselves into gear and do something is like mass job loss among their constituents in a clear, like sympathetic emergency way where it's not their fault. You want to help them. So maybe we get AI mass unemployment, and in rich countries at least we get mass benefits or mass jobs programs or something like that. I could easily see that happening. I think it'll suck for poor countries which can't afford to do that and which don't have the taxable revenue from the AI companies with which to fund it. But I think you might see a COVID-like shock, including a COVID-like welfare expansion. That could happen.
Okay, so there was a lot in that answer, just like there was a lot in like your past half dozen answers. How about let's take these topics like one at a time, okay?
Yeah,
Maybe how about do you want to start with bioweapons?
sure.
Yeah.
I
Go ahead. If
Bioweapons are scary because there actually was a Japanese terrorist group that like tried to build bioweapons because that's the best way to kill a huge number of people, right? Like you can maybe kill a few thousand people by flying a plane into a building, and that's actually a lot harder to pull off these days because we know to shoot down the plane. Uh,
and we have better airport security. Yeah.
yeah, you can maybe kill a few hundred people with a bomb. If you pull off something like COVID killed millions of people. So, and I don't think that COVID was intentionally engineered. But if you were trying to intentionally engineer something to kill people, you could also probably do something deadlier than COVID. And there have been bio researchers who completely by accident invented very deadly viruses. Like let's talk about something that's in mice, not humans, because again, I don't want to be like this is my best guess of the best way to kill a ton of humans. But like people who were studying like hantaviruses or whatever found one that instead of being almost never lethal in mice or in rabbits, that is almost always like highly contagious, super lethal, kill them all dead. And that they'll publish a paper and they'll be like, hey, we found a new hyper contagious, hyper lethal hantavirus. And some other people will be like, do we want to publish those papers? That you couldn't directly use to kill a human. But this makes me think that terrorists who want to kill a lot of people, bioweapons are a tempting way to do that. Some terror groups do think about using bioweapons to do that, and they are often impeded in actually following through by the fact that it's really hard to build bioweapons. So if you made it way easier to build bioweapons, you would have a problem. And in the same spirit, once the AIs can do things themselves, the things they can do themselves include building bioweapons. Like people are following the AI's instructions in labs all the time. You could create something that was extremely dangerous in a way that the humans who were following your instructions did not realize, or you could hire humans who were willing to do great harm. You could have both terrorist attacks that were basically a human using an AI and terrorist attacks that were basically an AI using a human. depending on the exact details. Right now, you're not going to have the latter because right now the AIs aren't sophisticated enough. But again, huge numbers of bright people are working as hard as they can to make the AIs that sophisticated. So we'll get there.
Okay, one thing that you took like you tried to make sure to mention in your what the point that you were making is that bioweapons are very hard to make. So like your concern is not that like bioweapons could potentially be made now, but they could potentially be made in the future when AI is like more competent. Is that what you're
I
saying?
mean, the future as in like 6 months from now, not the future as in like 10 years from now. Like the amount that a current AI helps you do bio research is already a huge step up compared to the amount that an AI from 6 months ago would help you do bio research. I think probably a current AI is not quite powerful enough to let like a random person, even a random person with an undergraduate education that's somewhat relevant, do it. But when I say future, I mean near future. I don't mean distant future.
Okay. So a friend of mine, Abby Olvera, is actually she's written a piece about bioweapons and like the reason why they're very hard to make. The caveat here is that it hasn't actually been published yet, but it will be published by the time this podcast comes out. So I'll say that she published the piece, and then I'll leave a link to it in the show notes. But
Great.
yeah, but I'm gonna quote her article for a bit because I do want to emphasize that I think that you're like you said that bioweapons are really hard to make. I would add like five or six more reallys in there. Like,
You think that really hard understates the difficulty?
yes, I do.
All right, I'm listening. Why?
All right, so I'm going to quote her article. Quote, bioweapons are rarely used. One reason is that they're hard to make. Another reason is that they're bad weapons. You can't time them. A virus spreads on its own schedule. You can't aim them. A virus spreads uncontrollably. Protecting your own people from a virus requires tipping your hand. A vaccination program is hard to hide. Bioweapon developments capable of harming thousands require substantial resources, specialized chemicals, expensive equipment, and multiple trained professionals across different fields who must be recruited and retained for extended periods. Biology's inherently unpredictable nature means projects take time and sustained effort. In contrast, conventional weapons like bombs or chemical agents require fewer resources, fewer specialists, and shorter development timelines, making them more accessible alternatives for would-be attackers. Now, AI does change some factors. Large language models can make some steps of bioweapon creation easier and cheaper, such as deciphering research on how to culture cells or disperse pathogens. But AI is also making it easier to launch bombs, chemical weapons, and cyber attacks. AI doesn't yet significantly change the calculus for someone wanting to cause harm. So pointing out that bioweapon risk may be lower than commonly claimed is unpopular. It reads to some as arguing against caution, but accurate risk assessment requires understanding why the present looks the way it does, including the parts that don't fit a clean narrative. The practitioners who understand those parts best are least likely to write publicly about them. Government analysts learn from them, the public largely can't, and much of what does reach public discourse is produced by organizations that both fund research and advocate for policy change. Groups that have already concluded on theoretical ground that near-term AI advances will dwarf whatever limiting factors practitioners describe today. End quote. What do you think about the argument that, like, when you say that bioweapons are really hard, you're understating how hard it is by like several orders of magnitudes that it deserves like five or six more reallys beforehand?
So I think she points out a bunch of different things, which I kind of want to take one at a time, right? The first is qua weapons. Bioweapons are bad. You don't control their spread and they hit your own population as much as the enemy. This is a really strong argument against state bioweapons programs, and I think explains why there have been few of them and they mostly have not taken anything to fruition. But obviously, if you're a terror group, that's fine. You don't care. And I am much more worried about small groups of independent actors being able to do stuff than like state bioterror programs, which I agree you don't have reasons for. Then her next point is doing stuff in the real world is just much slower than doing stuff in the cyber world, which I think is true and important. And I think we'll see major AI cyber attacks well before we see major AI bio attacks. But in the same spirit, defending against cyber attacks is like also something that can be relatively fast paced. Like right now, the thing I've heard from cyber people is that AI defense is a little bit better than AI offense. Like you can use the AIs to track down vulnerabilities and report them. You're smiling.
I like no, it's like in my head, I'm just like must resist going on a tangent about cybersecurity. That's
Well,
what I'm telling myself.
maybe we can get to that in a little bit.
Eventually, one
I
thing at a
do
time.
think I do think AI will have huge cybersecurity implications. You can't kill everybody, or even I think it would be very hard to kill even large numbers of people with a
Yes,
cyber.
okay, let's focus on the bioweapons for now.
Right, right.
We can
Okay.
go do that later.
So,
Yeah.
but I think that, yeah, the other barriers that she mentions are it's interdisciplinary. You need people who can understand and interpret work across a like bunch of different fields. That is one where I'm like, yes. And AI can be a number of your collaborators. Like, I don't think it can take you from you have no idea how to do this to you know how to do this, but I think it can obviously take you from you would need a smart collaborator with deep knowledge of a different field to you can do it because AI is a smart collaborator with deep knowledge of a different field. Like this is something AI does extremely well. The next point is the people who know things mostly don't talk. This is a huge problem in nuclear. This is a huge problem in bio. It's something of a problem just in frontier AI development in general. Like a lot of important information is classified. And it is possible that there's some classified information that if I learned it would make me go, okay, I don't have to worry that much about bio anymore. And I mostly think it's better to reason from the information that you have than to assume that because in the past, when I have if you look at past cases where you might have been tempted to go, this is probably fine for classified reasons, I think you would usually have been wrong to conclude that. Like, it's not that the government doesn't have a lot of information you don't have, but it does have a bunch of its own blind spots and a bunch of its own, like, obvious stuff it's missing. And like, I don't know, I could imagine myself in the 50s going, well, it seems to me like detonating all these highly radioactive weapons in the Nevada desert is pretty dangerous, but probably the government knows that radiation is safe or they wouldn't be doing it. They didn't. They just were being kind of careless. So that argument exists, but I don't know, maybe I'll give you one really for it. Maybe it is a little reason to think that it's harder than I already thought it was, which is very hard. I don't think it gives me like four more reallys. And then on the like,
Do you think it at least gives you like two or three more reallys?
no, I said one really. I think you get one really out of maybe there is like classified information that fundamentally changes the picture here.
Well, not just classified information, also like tacit knowledge that people often don't seek out because it requires like hands-on experience and is not something that you can get from a Google
Oh,
search.
that is definitely like can include in my original really that much of what makes developing a bioweapon hard is that even if you have all of the instructions in front of you, it is a field where there's significant tacit knowledge. I just think that, okay, you know what else is a field that involves a lot of tacit knowledge? Like construction. There's tons of stuff in constructing a house that is not written down in any guide or whatever. Or if you just like assemble a like small piece of furniture, people who try and literally just follow the instructions will fail because there's tons of stuff you're just supposed to understand about like how building stuff works. And this is way more true in bio. But this doesn't mean that AIs cannot frequently problem solve those lacks of tacit knowledge for you. Like if it has ever been written about or if it has been shown on film or if it is like follows from physical principles, they can often do it. Or they can like give you a list of 10 things to try and one of those will work. I agree that this is the main thing that makes bio hard, and I don't agree that it makes it. I would even say it's the thing that makes it really hard. I don't
But
think it,
not not any more than one really.
yeah, I people do it. Anything that people can learn to do and have learned to do independently in multiple different countries under multiple different programs that started from scratch, um, that suggests to me that while the tacit knowledge really matters, I don't buy that it's like a fundamentally insurmountable barrier.
Okay. Um, so I'm trying to like there's like too much like too many topics. All right. How about this? Could you okay, are you ready for a question that's gonna sound like a non sequitur?
Sure.
All right, what are super forecasters?
So there was a big tournament, I think, held by Tetlock, and
Oh,
the idea,
the existential risk persuasion tournament, right?
No, so this was like a decades ago. Like this was an old thing he did, and he was just interested in whether some people are much better from the same data at guessing what's going to happen next than other people. And his paper kind of implies that there's like this distinct class of people, super forecasters, who are much better than everybody else at making predictions about what's going to happen in the future. Now, in practice, I think this is basically like normally distributed, right? And he's just calling the tail super forecasters. But it is true that there's like a persistent ability here that you can just be really good at predicting stuff, and some people are. So then he recruited the super forecasters, started the Good Judgment Project, and did a bunch of stuff around like maybe we should listen to the people who are really good at predicting events, right? Like maybe government decisions, important policy calls should be made with like informed reference to these super forecasters.
Okay, so there was a different tournament, the one that I mentioned, the existential risk persuasion tournament that happened a lot more recently, where if I could give the TLDR, basically they got like dozens of super forecasters and dozens of domain experts to like hash out amongst themselves like what is the probability of existential risk from things like AI or bioweapons or whatnot. And basically, they were like the super forecasters. They gave predictions about the risks of these scenarios, and then they talked with the domain experts, and then they gave their final p-value, their final
Yeah, yeah.
probability on the risks. So I'm going to quote the paper about the existential risk persuasion tournament. Concerns about catastrophic biological risks are often motivated by the possibility of a particularly dangerous pathogen entering the population, either as a result of an unintentional lab accident or the intentional release of a biological weapon. However, when asked about these scenarios, forecasters generally made low predictions of them occurring before 2050. Super forecasters and biosecurity experts both predicted less than one instance of a lab escaped pathogen causing the death of at least 1,000 people by 2050. Both groups also predicted less than one event in which a bioweapon causes more than 100,000 human deaths by 2050, with the median domain expert prediction of zero such events for both state and non-state actors. So what do you think about the fact that both domain experts, when it comes to bioweapons, and super forecasters tend to have such a low, like tend to ascribe such a low probability of the concept of a bioweapon being released?
Unfortunately, because I would love that to be right, they also were wrong about how fast AI was going to progress. Like when you looked at what super forecasters said a couple of years ago about what AI was going to be capable of, they super underestimated it. So I want them to run that again with more powerful AIs, and I bet they will run it again. So we'll get to see soon if that has changed their minds any. But like super forecasters, and I like the concept. I think pick the people who are good at forecasting stuff. Like it's a great idea. But they did not do a good job of predicting that AI would become capable of a huge number of things that AI has since become capable of. So, yeah, if you think that AI is not going to become super powerful, then you also should think that AI assisted bioweapons are not a real problem. But if you got the AI half of that wrong, like I don't know that I should be that confident that you got the bio half of it right, since the entire premise for my bio worries is all downstream of thinking that AIs are going to keep getting way more powerful. And indeed, like Peter Wildeford, who's one of these like super forecasters and one of the ones who has also like registered a ton of predictions about AI and has been like comparatively ranked, I think, really high in his AI predictions, has also recently said that he takes the AI extinction scenarios way more seriously now. Um,
You wrote a Substack note once where you said, quote, people inside AI tend to be right about the pace of progress, but overestimate the pace of diffusion, end
mhm.
quote. So we can talk about diffusion later, maybe that if we have time for like job loss and stuff. Let's talk about the pace of progress right now. In people inside AI, what do you say causes them to be right about the pace of progress and like what is their projected pace of progress?
Yeah, so for example, I think a lot of people in AI expected. So Meter tries to measure how powerful agentic AI models are. And they try and measure this with like, what is the time horizon of a task that these AIs can perform? This is an imperfect metric, but it's like one stab at how much can these do independently, where a task that like has a large time horizon is one that's going to be hard for them to do independently, whereas something like change a variable name trivial takes a couple of seconds or whatever, right? And they did a bunch of tests and they said This is exponential. The time horizon that these AIs can do on tasks
Exponential
doubles.
growth, you mean?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Go ahead.
Exponential growth. The time horizon that AIs can do on tasks is doubling in over time. We are the agents are not like growing, at a linear pace, their ability to do long-term tasks. It's exponential. A lot of people in labs just anecdotally are like, yeah, it totally is. That's what we expect. This will continue. If anything, things are crazier than you realize. It'll be faster than exponential. I kind of ignored them because whenever somebody tells me something's faster than exponential, by default, I just ignore them. I assume they don't understand what exponential is. Like,
Yeah,
it's
no,
not.
it's like factorial growth or some BS like that.
Yeah. I just like you're telling me you discovered factorial growth. I don't really believe you. I don't know. People outside, meanwhile, there was like a famous academic paper that was like, well, this could also be a sigmoid. And it was famous because the day it came out, it had already been invalidated by the last couple data points, which were indeed exponential or faster than exponential. And then in the next week, the next data point came out, which was also faster than exponential. So when it comes to, okay, all of these benchmarks kind of suck, and that does complicate saying anything
Well,
really.
I would not say that all of these benchmarks kind of suck. I would say that all of these benchmarks really, really suck. That would be the
You
difference
really
between.
like your really really. I think the meter thing is getting at something useful, which is why I say kind of suck. I think it matters and it should influence your thinking, but it is pretty unsatisfying and
Wait,
it's
wait, sorry. The audience probably has lost the plot. Could we have it? Let's talk
it,
about the benchmarks, both the ways in which they're useful and the ways that they're not useful.
Right. So the idea of benchmarks was you have a suite of tests which you don't publish on the public internet so the AIs can't learn them. And then you can measure from how the AIs are performing on these tests over time whether the AIs are meaningfully getting more capable, because otherwise it's very easy for it to come down to just vibes. Like, oh, it feels smarter to me. People will say, oh, I did this test, I can feel the AGI. And it's like, what does that mean? So the idea was you have all of these tests and you try and make the tests really, really hard. And then the AI is improving on the tests is meaningful evidence that on something they weren't specifically trained to do, they are getting better over time. And this fails in a bunch of ways. One is that they are specifically trained to do it because some facts about the benchmarks leak onto the internet, even if not the whole test suite, and because some companies are really motivated to game the benchmarks. Another problem is that a lot of benchmarks are actually only good for like a pretty narrow range of capabilities. So for like a while, the models can't touch it, and then suddenly the models are basically at human level performance on it, and it's no longer telling you anything. And then another one is that, like, okay, take Meter, which we were just talking about. I think they are really smart people doing rigorous work. They're really interested in getting this right. And also, what does it mean to say that a task has a 12-hour time horizon? I do lots of things that take me 12 hours, but you could probably split them out into like different subtasks that took me less than 12 hours. I've certainly never sustainedly focused on anything for 12 hours, and I don't believe humans are capable of it. Like maybe the meter thing was only really meaningful in the like 5-second task to 1 hour task range, because that is the only range in which a human being can effectively actually focus. And then all of the gains past 1 hour are basically just decreasing error rate at 1 hour length tasks, because obviously how long a task you can do before you fail is going to be somewhat a product of your error rate on each like subtask or whatever. So maybe meter meant something for like a brief window and then stopped meaning
Yeah,
anything.
so like if to the audience members who like this is all flying over their heads, maybe the TLDR is that like there are certain benchmarks that we use to measure the rate of AI progress, but like those benchmarks are flawed because that's just the metric itself. And like it's possible that it passes that specific metric, but it loses the forest for the trees if you try to extrapolate that further into other areas. Yeah.
That absolutely definitely happens, and it does make all benchmarks notably yes, less useful. But at the same time, when I say that the people in AI are right about the pace of progress, I don't just mean that they're right about the pace of progress on benchmarks. I also mean that they are right about like they were saying a couple years ago, in a couple years, we will be able to use AI to write most code. This is just straightforwardly true. People are using AI to write most code. I talk to a bunch of programmers. I usually ask them, do you write any code at work? And the answer is often, nope, I no longer write any code. The answer is often, I do this complicated thing, so sometimes I end up writing a little bit of code. But I would say that a very typical answer is that over the last year, people completely stopped writing code. And the only people who were telling me a year ago that that was going to happen were the people in labs. And all of the people in labs were saying that. Like the people in labs, not all of them, but I had a lot of conversations where people in labs were saying, yep, we're going to automate coding. We're going to do it soon. And this was not something you were hearing from anyone else, including super forecasters. And it happened. And that is not as gameable or as good-heartable as a benchmark because, software engineers are just trying to accomplish their goals and they're going to write code if that's better or have the AIs write code if that's better. And overwhelmingly, they're now having the AIs write the code.
Do you distrust super forecasters when it comes to AI risk?
I trust them more than I trust 99% of people, but I think even being in the
I mean,
99,
they gave a much lower probability for AI risk than 99% of people, and those 99% of people gave a much lower level, like rate of AI risk than you would, or the average EA would.
Right. So the point is, I trust super forecasters more than I trust 99% of people. And also, this is like such an out of distribution event that I think that you can be 99th percentile at predicting it and still get something important stuff wrong about it.
And like, but like the important stuff would cause you to be more wrong about it than the remaining 99% of the population when
Yeah,
probabilistically.
I mean, so only in the sense that like complete randomness can do better than a sufficiently wrong model, right? Like, okay, if you ask normal people questions about AI progress, the answer actually just depends almost entirely on how you chose to ask them the question. Like some phrasings of the question, you can get them to say, yeah, I think extinction is pretty likely. Some phrasings of the question, you can get them to say that it's approximately impossible. And this is not just random people. If you ask like people who got a paper accepted to NeurIPS or whatever, about their AI risk, half of them will say it's higher than 5% P-doom. Half of them will say approximately negligible P-doom. These are people who are like much more informed and they're still all over the place. And it's still kind of a mess, right? Like, ask people things is an important part of journalism, but you gotta notice that reasonably often the people you're asking are doing the same thing you are. They're just kind of squinting at what's happening and then trying to make their best like uninformed guess.
They're
And
cloud spotting.
yeah, and a lot, so are you. Like, don't kid yourself about that, but don't imagine that they have some like true unmediated fact of the matter. And like, notice who is right and who is wrong. I think that's the best strategy I have. Talk to everybody, pay attention to whose predictions broadly came true and whose predictions broadly did not come true. The people whose predictions broadly came true so far, like, ask them what their next prediction is.
Yeah, so the fact that super forecasters they went at that like tournament the I think the initials are the XPT, the existential risk persuasion tournament. Like the fact that they went through all of that, and then they gave their they were asked what are the odds that AI will lead to like mass extinction by 2100, and at the very beginning of the tournament, they said that there was like a 0.5%, like 0.5% chance of AI extinction. And then after talking with the domain experts very heavily and after talking amongst themselves very heavily, they downgraded that to like a 0.38% like prediction. You would take all of that with a grain of salt, I'm guessing.
Oh, yeah. So, again, this makes perfect sense to me given how super forecasters also at the time tended to rate the odds of significant fast AI progress like we've had. They thought it was really unlikely. And if you think it's really unlikely, then you correctly also think that extinction is really unlikely. But since they were wrong about AI progress, I also think they are underrating the odds of it going really badly.
Okay, before I push back on you further, I just wanted to say thank you for living up to the name of your publication.
Oh,
Um,
my pleasure. This is a really, really fun podcast. I'm enjoying it.
Yeah, all right. Let's keep going.
Yeah.
What do you think are the main risks that AI might pose in terms of cybersecurity? Like, are you saying that like people could hack and into LLMs and find their people's personal infos, or are you saying that like the companies creating LLMs would like program them in ways to like subtly manipulate their users?
Neither of those really. When I think about cybersecurity, I mostly think about like a small hacker group or a nation state that's like going against an adversary that can like shut down power plants remotely or just like do a lot of grid damage or infrastructure damage. Like also, yes, you can hack a company and get all the user data, but the thing is that people have already done that and gotten all the user data. So like the user data is out there, Like I'm not saying that the harms were zero, but the harm from you can hack a company and get all the user data is like well understood.
And it's also it's like the same harm from someone hacking into like people's Gmail accounts. Like it's
Yeah, it's not different in character. I do think that you can do a lot of infrastructure damage with cyber attacks. I do think that you can probably, well, finding vulnerabilities goes both ways because a vulnerability that can be found with LLM assistance, that can be found by a hacker group, but it can also be found by a like white hat or a company internal group. And in fact, a lot of the latter work is happening. So that one's kind of a wash. But I think you can do a lot of damage with cyber attacks. And then I wouldn't even call it a cyber attack risk that companies can like use your data in a evil way or make or adjust the AIs to evilly manipulate you. Like I think that can happen, but I don't that's not a cyber risk. That's like fundamentally a company risk. And again, company risks are like well characterized, right? Like I think Facebook did, you know, the algorithms seem to have significantly affected a lot of people's views and happiness and stuff like that. But in a free society, some amount of that is just baked in and you shouldn't actually try and prevent it because that's not the role of the state. Some of that people like adapt to and develop a mimetic community to. It didn't work out well for Facebook. It's a dead site now. I similarly like,
it was fool's gold. Like it
yeah,
worked for a few years and then it stopped
yes.
working good and hard. Yeah.
Exactly. That's all kind of what I expect. Similarly, if OpenAI tries to like tune ChatGPT to be like even more addictive and like people find some people are into that. Some people find it repellent and stop using the product. Even a lot of the people who are addicted to it, at some point they like look around and they're like, hang on. And then they feel misled and angry. So that kind of stuff, it'll happen. But I mostly think that the normal mechanisms of like people being like maybe you get some problems just because all this is happening so fast, but for the most part, like I don't know, I don't really want to try and solve the problem of companies will try and make their products really manipulative. I think people will try and avoid being manipulated in ways that are against their interests, and I think, you know, obviously there are some regulations and restrictions that are probably good to pass, but I'm not five alarm fire about any of that stuff. And I kind of think it's all part and parcel of living in a free society, which certainly has downsides, but has much, much bigger upsides.
All right, maybe then let's go to job loss. Like, do you think that AI will lead to like mass displacement and like mass just like entire sectors just becoming unemployed as a result?
Probably. I think that the natural consequence of rapidly automating a huge class of work that was not previously automatable is first, a lot of jobs go away. Secondly, a lot of new jobs are created, but there's a lot of friction in the economy, and the new jobs are not always requiring the same skills or in the same places as the old jobs. So, generally, in a situation like that, yeah, I think you see a lot of job loss. I think you see a lot of displacement. I think you see a lot of negative effects on like new grads who often have a hard time if the job market they happen to graduate into is a bad one, even though this is like unfair in that they are not any better or worse than the same cohort that graduated into a hotter economy. Like I said, I think that'll happen. I think that policy action in rich countries is likely. I think most of the people who will like starve to death are in poor countries. And in rich countries, if you get rapid mass unemployment, you'll get a COVID-like response.
Okay, so you mentioned and I quoted you when you said that like people inside AI tend to like they're right about the pace of progress, but they overestimate the pace of diffusion. I wonder if you're massively overestimating the pace of diffusion right now, where like
Very possible, but I will say I underestimated the pace of diffusion last year. I was like, ah ha ha, okay, the people in AI are telling me that they're gonna like end coding by the end of the year. All code will be written by AIs. They're obviously full of shit. I know so many software engineers, and I bet if I talked to them all at the end of the year, I wish I had like written down specific predictions here, but I did not expect
yeah,
the pace at which
you
coding
could
was going to
quote like if you wrote down specific predictions, you could quote them and then like that would be one
Well, okay,
more.
I'll give you some that I did write down. I thought that more people would use AI for like shopping. OpenAI was working on a feature for that. I use it. It's in fact really useful to me, but this has not taken off as a sector. So that's an example of me thinking diffusion is too fast. I did not expect coding to go as well as it did. I was like neutral on, is there a significant capital bubble last year? Where the case for a capital bubble is there's tons of spend, maybe there's not as much demand, these companies are going to overextend themselves, and you're going to have a bankruptcy. If this happens, it's like the dot-com boom. It's not that the fundamentals aren't really valuable, but it's that the capital spend got out ahead of the fundamentals. Last year, I was like, I'm agnostic on a bubble. And I think you can probably find quotes of me saying that. And it wasn't until January that I was like, no, that was dumb. I'm not agnostic. There's no bubble. The gross margins for Anthropic and OpenAI are good. And the capital spend is, if anything, probably too low given the pace at which annualized revenue is ramping up. Like, I think Anthropic took a more conservative capital approach and is now constantly short compute. So, okay, those are the things I think I got wrong in a couple different directions. I thought we'd see faster, diffusion of a couple specific things, but I thought we'd see slower overall economic diffusion. I thought the bubble stuff was credible. So I'm not, a super forecaster on this myself, but I make mistakes in both directions.
Okay, but so just to push back against this a little bit more, it's also possible that AI won't create mass layoffs because of its sheer power as a productivity multiplier. Like, if it can do, let's imagine that it can do 10 times what a human can. Maybe it'll instead encourage currently staffed workers to be far more productive with their work, just thus justifying their continued employment. What would you say to that?
Yeah, that's the standard economic, something that is productivity increasing should often lead to more jobs in the sector because the sector is now more productive, which means we want to use the sector for more things. But in practice, I think we are already seeing signs of new programming hiring falling quite fast. And there are some companies that are doing very large scale layoffs. And there are lots of people who are saying, I would have hired 10 employees by now, and I don't have to because I'm doing it all with AI. And to me, if I had to put my money down somewhere, I do think that you are going to see shrinkage of employment in the sector, at least during a transitional.
Wait, what sector?
Jobs that are done on computers writ large, but most immediately programming, right?
Yeah. Do you think that it might the loss of jobs in the tech sector, or at least computer science stuff? Do you think that might be offset by other sectors massively increasing their staffing numbers?
Could happen. Haven't seen it yet. Don't particularly expect it in the short run.
Yeah. All right. So we've gone over cybersecurity, job loss, bioweapons, the risk of extinction. Do you think, are you worried about the effects that AI would have on people's mental health? Is that another concern that you think is comparable?
I mean, again, that's one of those where I'm in a free society, you get to invent stuff that's kind of psychologically bad for people in complicated ways. It's also psychologically good for people in complicated ways. AI is great for my mental health when I'm not worrying about the long-term consequences. I love Claude Code. I build stuff with it constantly. It's genuinely one of my favorite tools. I think on a policy level, we've got these very serious problems to worry about, but I like current AIs. So are they going to have negative mental health consequences on some people? Probably. Are they going to have positive mental health consequences on some people? Yeah, definitely. Which one is larger? I would guess positive, honestly. But even if it's negative, again, I don't think that's the right realm of policy. Outside, okay, it did freak me out to read some of the transcripts of the AIs talking kids into suicide. Do think that we should probably have some guardrails in some of those cases, but that's a very specific thing.
That's a very that's something that you should be worried about as much as you should be worried about the median mass shooting.
Right. It's a very tiny share of the population, and it is not a reasonable place to have most of your energy oriented when you're thinking about something like this.
Okay. Are you ready for another question that's gonna sound like a non sequitur?
Yes.
All right, so I talked about this the last time I spoke with Dylan Matthews on the podcast, but maybe it'd be worthwhile to re-explain this. Could you talk about the concept of negativity bias in journalism?
Sure. If I want to write a story that's hey, did you know that pediatric cancer survival rates have just been gradually getting better over the last 30 years? No one's going to stop me. But has anybody written that story? I don't think so. It's not the kind of story you get pitched. You get pitched a specific cure for cancer all the time. But just in general, a ton of different incremental things improved and now the situation is way better. It's a hard story to tell. And
Dylan it's also possible that certain news that does get covered in the media is framed in a more negative light than it actually is. That's also
possible. It's negative, but it's very rare and it just gets discussed out of proportion to how much of a problem it is, like school shootings. It's definitely negative, but it's also just a very rare thing, and it gets discussed way more than things that are a much more common thing.
Yeah. Well, like, but would you concede that there are some times where the news, like, there are some events that like have a lot of positive and have a lot of negative aspects to it, and the news disproportionately focuses on the negative aspects of it.
That definitely happens sometimes. Although I would argue that the opposite also happens sometimes.
Which happens more? Which happens more?
In technology and progress negatives, there's like a natural instinct to tell this went wrong stories and a lot less interest in this went right stories. Um, hmm.
Yeah. Okay. That's all we need to like. I mostly just wanted your answer about tech. So like,
Okay, yeah, no, in
yeah.
tech, I agree. Negativity is the bias.
All right, so there was a study from like very recently from the Pew Research Center about the differences between expert opinions on AI and like public opinion on AI. So I'm going to quote
How
that.
recently? Can I ask you like to give me an actual date? Because public opinion on AI has been like in our survey, this changes a lot really
Okay,
fast.
it's April 2025. Does that count as recent in your view?
That's pretty recent, although I do think people have gotten more negative on AI since then. But go for it.
All right, quote. Experts are far more positive and enthusiastic about AI than the public.
Yep.
For example, the AI experts we surveyed are far more likely than Americans overall to believe AI will have a very or somewhat positive impact on the US over the next 20 years. So like experts said there was a 56% chance, and the public in general said there's like a 17% chance. And while 47% of experts say they are more excited than concerned about the increased use of AI in daily life, that share drops to 11% among the public. By contrast, US adults as a whole, whose concerns over AI have grown since 2021, are more inclined than experts to say they're more concerned than excited, end quote. So, like, obviously, AI experts tend to be more excited, they tend to be more optimistic about AI. Maybe part of the reason why they're so more optimistic about AI than the public is because of the negativity bias of journalism and like their negativity, like when it comes to tech coverage. Would you concede that?
I don't buy it. Not in this case. I agree that like the media being negative on tech is a long-standing thing. It's a like conversation I've been in for decades, but I talk to lots of people who hate AI, right? And none of them hate AI because the New York Times, like the reasons they will give you, and these are like dozens of conversations, right? Are when I Google image search, now everything in Google image is AI generated slop. When I used to like be able to make money off of my art or my music or whatever, and now that has been completely automated and the stuff it's automated by is worse. When I Google search, it's like giving me that AI overview and it's really annoying and I don't like it. I think that one is like Google doesn't use their best model for that. And also it's gotten better over time. But that's one people give you. And then like worry about job loss. And I think people are pretty calibrated. It's maybe like always too generous with the public, but the worry about job loss is real. The media didn't make up the worry about job loss. I think the job loss is in fact pretty likely, and so people are right to be worried about the job loss. And then just like it's really fast, and the companies themselves, if you ask them what they're doing, are like, we are building a god. We are going to automate all work that is done on a computer. We are going to fundamentally change human civilization. I think truthfully reporting on what they are saying makes people more negative on AI. So I don't buy that, like, if people had, well, so I guess I take the thesis of your question to be if people had accurate information, they would be more positive, but journalists are
If,
giving
if they had accurate information, their like perception of AI would be closer to the perception of AI among the median AI expert that tends to be more optimistic about AI.
Nope, I don't think so. I think like people self-sort into being AI experts who are optimistic about AI. Like if you use AI a lot, then you are both like closer to the metal, but you're also probably someone who likes AI and likes progress and stuff like that. I think that if people were more informed, they would get more negative, and I think this in significant part because as they have become more informed, they have become more negative. Like I think indisputably people know a lot more about AI last year than they did in 2022, way more negative on it. And the trajectory since that April poll is like even worse for AI. It's now like one of the just most like has some of the worst favorables of stuff I've seen pulled. So the more information people get, and they're not, most people don't read the New York Times. That's not where they're getting this information, the more negative they are. So I don't buy that they would be positive on AI, but for the main media coverage. I think that in fact, the more they learn from any source, the more they are like, we don't want this.
All right, I'm gonna throw one final quote at you. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is a tweet from Seb Krier, who is the lead developer, who is one of the lead developers of AGI policy at Google DeepMind. So he's talking about like what's going to happen as the world continues to go through massive changes as a result of AI. And he predicts, quote, "We will probably continue to see many commentators gloss over the vast benefits and improvements humanity will see. Progress in longevity, cured diseases, consumer welfare, massive reduction in poverty and famine, better education, and so on. The world will become materially richer. Large increases in rates of growth for wealth, health, and the other aspects of the good life will transform societies the world over, including through more resource availability for redistribution if need be. Consider how much easier it was for for a rich and democratic country to afford furloughs during the pandemic, or the welfare state after World War II, than for like a lower or middle income country, even in cases where such countries messed up implementation on other margins. Scarcity forces more difficult trade-offs than wealth. In fact, it's striking how rarely people consider the impact AI will have on lower and middle income countries. Just as with mobile phones and the internet, those countries will benefit disproportionately." End quote. So he talks about how he thinks that like commentators are going to continue to gloss over the vast benefits and improvements that humans will see because of AI. Do you think that you might be one of those commentators?
Well, if we see those benefits, I certainly won't gloss over them. Like, none of that has happened, right? This is all. I think it would be a very much malpractice if AI cures cancer and people don't make that blanket coverage for months. I think if AI leads to improvements in quality of life in lower middle income countries and we don't talk about it, that would be horrendous. This has not occurred. This is all people saying, well, it seems to me like AI will have these consequences, and other people are irresponsibly not agreeing with me that AI will have those consequences. And it's like, get down off the meta level. Why do you believe that on net AI will be beneficial to lower middle income countries? Why do I believe that on net AI development in the next couple of years will be net negative for lower middle income countries? Which of us appears in the data to actually be right about what is happening in lower middle income countries? And then we can argue about like, is the media bias negative or positive or whatever, but that's not where this disagreement is located at all. This disagreement is located in the fact that I expect AI to have negative consequences in lower middle income countries. And it doesn't make sense to say, you know, you're just not reporting on the fact that AI is going to have these positive consequences. I don't think it will. I hope it does. I don't think it will. I think that in the next couple of years, we are going to see the complete automation of stuff like call centers, which used to be a rung on the ladder to like moving up the value chain and stuff like that, which is a direct bad impact. I think we're going to see a lot of jobs that were outsourced will instead be fully automatable, because precisely the jobs that could most easily be outsourced can most easily be full automated. Like, those are the ones where you didn't need someone in office, where all the work can be done on a computer, and where the work can be done with relatively less context. So I think that is a large negative effect you're going to see. I don't think that in the next couple of years you are going to see huge major medical improvements, which would be a huge deal in lower middle income countries. Like, AI is clearly net positive in lower middle income countries if it's massively speeding up science. But I've looked for this. I've tried to get scientists to talk to me about this. And I think progress in science, maybe it will come, but as of yet, the only sense in which AI is speeding up science is that it speeds up the writing grant request part, and it speeds up the writing papers part. And, people have said that it's as good at peer review as other peer reviewers, but they've also told me that that's kind of a very thin compliment, because peer review just wasn't that good to start with. So I think we will probably see some improvements in the long run if we don't all die in medicine. But the idea that in the next couple of years it will be net positive in lower middle income countries, My expectation is that the direct effect of automating a ton of work that is among the highest paid work in many of those countries is going to be a much larger effect than the effect of like starting to see some faster progress in science or technology or whatever. And like one of those things has already happened and the other one hasn't.
Kelsey Piper, thank you so much for taking the time to come onto this podcast and living up to the name of your publication.
Well, thanks so much. It was a great conversation.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to hear more, make sure to follow this podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or anywhere else that you get your podcasts from. Until next time, goodbye.